Um, our forum tonight will address 8 of the visioning planning topics. Community visioning oftentimes precedes more in-depth master planning. Visioning can help gather community input into high-level goals and priorities for future collective decision-making. Involved in the process are the town manager's office, the WIN2030 steering committee, the MAPC consultants, and participating community members like yourself. This online visioning workshop comes in 2 parts. This real-time Zoom event for those of you currently logged on, as well as a part 2 online open house survey that will be live for 2 weeks from tonight, October 15th, until November 1st. The 2-week survey is another opportunity for community participation and input at the convenience of Winthrop community members. The town is contracted with the MAPC Regional Planning Agency as the consultants to lead the process to obtain community input. I am Carlos Montagnes, the project manager for the WIN2030 visioning process. I'm joined by our MAPC consultant team. Helping with tonight's meeting are Ralph Wilmer, Mark Rassicott, and Christian Brandt. Joining us this evening is the town manager, Austin Faison, as well as our steering committee members. I will now turn it over to Austin Faison for a few opening remarks.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to thank everyone who's joining us and participating. These are very important processes for the long-term future of Winthrop. I'd also like to thank the MAPC for being great partners throughout this process. You know, it has been long and arduous because of the current temperature of our circumstances, unfortunately. We've had to have 2 visioning meetings, large-scale ones virtually, which is different. This is not how anyone intended this to start or proceed when this project was initially conceived, but we are continuing to move forward because these are, again, important processes for Winthrop to go through. I've talked about a visioning document in Winthrop since I came to Winthrop a few years ago. And what's really important about that to me is that I want the community of Winthrop to take control of the direction that it's going. And you can see in some of the things that I've worked on in my time in Winthrop, there've been projects that have been talked about in the community for a long period of time. Center Business District, for example. When that was resurfaced in the 1980s, I don't think the people who made those decisions about that project thought it would take another 25, 30 years after they did some surface work on the project for the infrastructure work underneath to be done. What we're trying to do here is set a stage and set a framework of where we would like to be in 10 years. And what this visioning document will do is it will help inform the planning department that will have a director in 2.5 months from now. It will help inform my budget process. It will help inform the council year to year of the direction that the community has identified that they would like the town to go in. So this is a really interesting process for us to be able to determine the direction of the community, both in the budgeting and financial planning process, but also the physical space that we operate in. People talk about not having the ability to advocate for their desires in the budget process because it's somewhat of a regimented process and there's limited community involvement other than the public meetings. This is an important example of a way that the community can impact the direction that the community goes. And again, this is very high level things. These are essentially loose metrics that we're working towards over a long period of time, but it will inform those documents as well as, in terms of planning, the next direction that we would go after we finish this process is into a master planning process, a town-wide process. And why that is important is, again, we want to take the reins on the direction that we are going as a community. It is very important for Winthrop to decide what direction and what style it would like future development and future changes to the community, how they would like those to happen. Winthrop, unfortunately, it has unique identifiers in town, but it may not have its own unique identity. And that's what this process can help us do. If we want to embrace a vision, again, longer term, of a direction that we would like to take the town, this is the process. This is very important for us to do to encourage ourselves and our neighbors and everyone in the community. I'm going to be working very hard, again, to have as many people as possible in this community fill out and participate in this survey. We want this data because we want as many people in the community to feel like their voices are being heard and represented in this process. It's a, you know, I talk about voting and those types of things frequently. It's another relatively low stress, low cost way to participate in your own civic community, do your own civic duty and civic actions, but also, again, help control really the destiny of Winthrop. So this has been a really exciting process. I'm happy that we're continuing to make progress on it and get closer to refining what this vision is going to be, so then it can help inform me and my staff and the council of what direction that we are going to take the community in the future, because we are going to have limited finances for the foreseeable future, and it will be very important for us to be utilizing as much information as we have at our hands and at our fingertips available, so that we can make good decisions on behalf of the community. So again, thank you to the MAPC for helping us run this. Thank you to the WIN2030 Advisory Committee as well. They've worked hard all summer on this type of stuff along with MAPC. So thank you for everyone who's on this and participating and who watches it later, and anyone who may see a second of this and do the survey. Much appreciated. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Austin, for that. So now we're going to proceed with the rest of the presentation. We're going to go over some background slides before we get into the actual vision topics, and then we'll have the rest of the actual committee and community discussion on the presentation slides. In terms of background from a regional perspective, as the regional planning agency for Greater Boston, MAPC strives to help communities supplement the local capacity, brainstorm ideas, and try to find common solutions to issues that oftentimes cross municipal boundaries. Winthrop's part of MAPC's Inner Core Committee subregion. This subregion consists of 21 representatives from the metropolitan area's innermost communities. The committee meets regularly in order to address common issues, and also they attempt to pull together collective ideas. Brief town overview. This oblique aerial highlights Winthrop's business districts, open spaces, and their major roads. It's in the red is Winthrop Center's central business district. The areas in orange are the neighborhood business areas. The areas in green show the open spaces. And lastly, one can see in the light blue various community and civic facilities such as the schools, police and fire, places of worship, the health center, and the Dean Winthrop House. Here we have a closer perspective of the neighborhood anchors, where much of the town's civic, shopping, work, and social activities take place. In addition to Winthrop Center with its 2 squares, we can see activity nodes such as Maggie's Corner, businesses in and near Crystal Cove Marina, and the Main Street cluster near Atlantis Marina. Here we see the town's 4 gateways, or points of arrival for visitors, workers, and residents. In addition to the town's 2 road gateways via Revere and East Boston, one can also arrive by the Blue Line with 2 connecting buses, as well as by ferry service via the Aquarium, Quincy, and the Seaport. In terms of assets and opportunities, Winthrop is one of Massachusetts' most compact communities. It has distinct neighborhoods. It's a coastal community with a scenic landscape, and it has a dedicated small business community. Recent and ongoing accomplishments include the newer central business district zoning, as well as the CBD sewer improvements that will help to continue to unlock town potential. An outdoor learning center at the Belle Isle Marsh Ecology Park is also underway. Other assets include the existing bus routes. There's 2 of them connecting to the Blue Line service in East Boston, as well as the town's own ferry service. Compared to the state average and comparison waterfront communities, Winthrop has a higher public transportation use and shorter transit commute times. Lastly, Winthrop has an evolving bike and walk network. In terms of challenges, there are various recent planning studies that we highlighted during the first public forum. The following are some of the challenges that we noted facing Winthrop. These include the presence of numerous underutilized commercial properties that generate limited tax revenue for the town. Population has been declining since the 1970s. At the same time, it's been aging. There has been a 41% job loss between 1990 and 2010, which is an opposite trend of a lot of other comparison waterfront communities. The town has a low population of daytime workers and shoppers that are needed in order to support local businesses. And there's a 68% retail leakage of resident spending outside of the town, according to a UMass Boston study. The town's limited 2 roadway connections to neighboring communities is also potentially impacting its visibility as a shopping destination option in the area, in the region. Lastly, the town faces housing affordability challenges. 44% of the households are cost burdened. Cost burdened households pay 30% or more of their monthly housing costs towards housing, which can affect their ability to meet other needs. Of these 44% cost burdened households, half of them are composed of senior households. The town is currently also short of the minimum 10% for the subsidized housing inventory, which is a measure of addressing the need and the demand for varied and affordable housing options for numerous segments of the community's population. So in terms of the purpose for a vision, community visioning allows for collective brainstorming of ideas. It synthesizes the community input into consensus goals, and those consensus goals are then used to be able to draft together a vision statement. Those goals in the vision statement can then be used to help community members reflect on priorities and make decisions together that are grounded in some form of common understanding. Thus far, we have started to see some emerging ideas. As part of the first online Saturday public forum in May, we had approximately 36 community participants. Following that Zoom event, we had a 6-week-long community survey that resulted in 378 respondents to the survey. Based on this initial community input, we're starting to see emerging consensus goals on some of the visioning topics. On your screen is a brief sampling of some of them. Tonight, we hope to hold an informative discussion before we ask you all to take a new 2-week-long survey starting tonight until November 1st. Please share the link with your family, friends, and neighbors so that we can get everyone else's input as well in the community. Tonight is the part 1 of the open house. The next slides will highlight the 8 visioning topics, as well as a few sample questions and possible ideas for your consideration. We will then have a committee panel discussion, followed by a fuller question and answer session afterwards. Keeping tonight's discussion in mind, you can then take the survey at your own pace. We also encourage anyone who was unable to attend tonight's Zoom meeting to also take the survey. So I want to thank you again for making time tonight. Again, tonight's discussion is intended to be food for thought. So then you can then take the 35 question survey within the next 2 weeks at your own pace. Now we're going to go over quickly over the 8 visioning topics. The following are a few questions and possible ideas intended to spark a community discussion after the presentation. We worked with the WIN2030 advisory committee to draft a 35 question community poll in order to start eliciting ideas and goals for the vision report. The following slides cover a sampling of these questions by topic, so then we can have the committee panel discussion and the community question and answer afterwards. On the topic of housing and neighborhoods, some questions or ideas we could consider are there any concerns with current living conditions or neighborhoods, such as affordability or housing insecurity? What kinds of amenities do you want in your neighborhood? Potential ideas could include tot lots, dog parks, or others that you can suggest. On jobs and economic development, here are some ideas and potential questions to ask. What economic development ideas should the town focus on for improvements? Could a brewery be an economic magnet? Other ideas could include how to attract shoppers to town. Could leveraging properties along the waterfront for amenities and redevelopments help to grow businesses as well as attract tourists? Are there new transformative opportunities, such as redeveloping key public properties that could provide multi-purpose facilities and projects that can serve residents as well as bring economic growth to town? On the third topic of climate and community resilience, which strategies could the town pursue for flood risk reduction? Some ideas other communities have employed include creating living shorelines with deliberate coastal plantings in order to mitigate beach erosion, as well as the impact of storm waves. Another idea could include purposefully redesigning parks in order to accommodate occasional flooding. On the topic of public facilities, what opportunities exist to enhance existing public facilities or create entirely new ones? Some things we could consider are a possible greenway extension from Constitution Beach in East Boston to Orient Heights and ultimately to the town of Winthrop, or possibly a boardwalk or a gazebo and other improvements at Crystal Cove. Another idea could be incorporating public art into a lot of the central business district developments. On the topic of open space and recreation, are there any quote unquote big ideas for park amenities or large festive community events that could foster a greater sense of community and bring tourism to town to help support businesses? What about landmark sculpture for the enjoyment of residents to brand the town, and that could potentially be seen from afar from Revere or East Boston in order to attract visitors? Other ideas could include something as simple as summer movie nights at local parks. On the visioning topic of operational service delivery by the town, which town services could the town, does the town need to improve? Some ideas for consideration could be curbside composting for better waste management, or improving town public relations and communications through website improvements or other mechanisms. What about big ideas for improvements to town services, such as a mobile phone app to make it a lot easier to interface and request town services, or even offering something in the order of a circulator bus that could go between businesses, the town center, and parks in order to reduce traffic as well as provide convenience and not reliance solely on vehicles. On transportation, what concerns you the most about transportation in town? Is it unsafe walking conditions, poor transit access, or something else? What should be done in order to improve the transit or bus experience in Winthrop? Is service frequency an issue, or is it reliability? What about lower transit fares or better facilities? These are some of the things we want to keep in mind when we're having the discussion and also taking the survey. On our final visioning topic on schools and education, is there anything specific that could be improved for either K through 12 or adult learning? Is it adequate funding to maintain existing conditions or increase funding to improve them? What about extracurricular activities versus the core curriculum and other programs associated with it? Is there a specific opportunity that could have a high level beneficial community impact? Examples could include greater awareness of the remote workforce training program that exists via Wakefield Regional VOTEX facility, or increased participation in Safe Routes to School program, for example. So those are the 8 topics. Now that we've covered them and a few sample questions and ideas associated with them intended to kind of frame our discussion, we'll spend the rest of the evening with a 40-minute committee panel discussion. And after that, we'll follow it with a full 30-minute community question and answer session. Once we've concluded both of these portions of the meeting, then we will ask everyone to please complete that community survey that's highlighted in the link on the bottom of your screen. For our WIN2030 panel discussion tonight, we have our 6 committee members present. They are Robert Carroll, Peter Christopher, Wendy Millar-Page, Jennifer Powell, Betsy Shade, and Julia Wallers. Julia, Wendy, and Jennifer will help us begin the discussion tonight by starting us off with 3 questions touching 3 of the 8 visioning topics. And just to clarify, tonight's discussion is intended to be food for thought, so then you can individually take your time providing us with your input via the survey. We hope that the panel discussion tonight will highlight some of the ideas and possibly their merits, the merits of the ideas for your consideration while we have the discussion and you take the survey. With that said, I think we're going to start. We have on the topic, I think Julia's going to get us started on the topic of transportation, followed by Jennifer on open space and Wendy on economic development. So we would like to help us get started, Julia.
Sure. Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself there. So thanks everyone. Thanks Carlos for the overview. Thanks everyone for coming out to a Zoom on a night after many of us spend lots of hours during the day on Zoom. Can't get enough of this platform these days. But yeah, I mean, Carlos had a slide. Everyone knows I'm very passionate about transportation. In Winthrop, I think we have some unique challenges and some challenges that aren't so unique. So I guess it's the big overarching question that I don't necessarily think we have a good consensus about is really that high level question of, you know, what is the biggest transportation challenge? Like, what is the root of the challenges that we feel around mobility and access in town? And then that we all think differently about that depending on how we get around, on how we're able to get around and where we need to go. And of course, in a post-pandemic world, it's all different. Mobility has been dramatically impacted, but the challenges remain the same. So that's a big question that that I would put out there. Do you want me to talk about the answers too? I can't remember. We just
Sure. Yeah. So this is intended to, you know, to discuss your ideas in response to the question, pose them to other committee members, and have community participants benefit from, you know, the pros and the cons and the merits of these ideas.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would say that, what's unique to Winthrop and our transportation challenges is that, we have limited access points as far as getting in and out of town. That's, almost to the point of like an island would experience. But at the same time, we have fairly good connectivity to the region once you do make that trek, crossing the line or the bridge. But within Winthrop itself, and that's what I think the purpose of this visioning process is, really to look at transportation within our community, not just how do we get out of it, how do we get around when we're here, and then when we need to access jobs and goods and services, which most of us need to leave town to do, how can that be a better experience? But when we're in Winthrop, I really like to look at we're such a small town. We have such a tight-knit network of streets that are actually very well connected. And that's something that's always stood out to me since I've, been coming to Winthrop, and since I've lived here for 4 years now, but have been coming here for almost 15 years. Just how easy it is to walk around town, but how much better that would be if there were, more things to walk to, if we had more destinations. So building in the connection between transportation and land use is something that, I want to throw out there for people to think about. We're a great town to take a walk in, but what if there were more things to walk to, and they were more, connected to one another? Certainly the issues around the MBTA and bus service, we only have so much control over, but we can do a lot to improve that, just by improving our own facilities and our own street network. And I think we've made progress, but we have a lot of work to do, for sure.
Anyone else, any thoughts on the transportation landscape in terms of options?
Just to piggyback on that, and Julia is the expert here, but we do have a community where a lot of people rely on public transportation, so having access to that is obviously important. Connectivity to the subway is important, and having those clear bus routes, making sure those bus routes are kind of going through the places that need them the most, and are kind of trying to kind of connect that, be that connective tissue in town, is also kind of important. There are some legacy bus routes, and I know we've kind of worked on improving as best we can, but there's some resistance, either with width of streets and or parking on streets that make it sometimes difficult to connect some of the important parts in town to one another. I think that's something that we should, as a community, look at more seriously in order to better serve everyone in town. And then thinking about connectivity, not only to the one place we're used to, which is the sort of blue line, but is there other connectivity that will help folks get to Target, or something like that outside of town, or go the other way to Revere, because we're kind of a one-trick pony going to East Boston. So I think those are all things that we could consider to improve. And I'm again just thinking about the public transportation, but we do have we have lots to kind of think about too. Just, I know we have transportation committees that are looking at the speed of roads and signage and things like that, and that all contributes to a very walkable community, but trying to get the speed of the cars down so we all feel safe biking, with our kids walking to and from school, which we're all encouraged to sort of do. All these things are kind of interconnected, and so making a decision about bringing the speed of cars down helps you feel safe walking, or helps you feel safe just being in your front yard, right? So that's all I think what we should need to think about, what kind of community we want to have.
Yeah, and I see I see some things in the chat box about Lime Bike and bike share, and that was really great. We had that option, and so much of a big part of the industry and transportation right now, particularly post COVID-19, has been modal choice, giving people options, and not making that the necessity of having choices and different ways to choose to move around based on your comfort level, based on your ability, is really more important than ever. And sort of the old transit advocate beating the drum, everyone get on the bus, everyone get on transit. Is that necessarily the right thing to do? We can't have crowded buses anymore. A crowded bus is not a successful bus. We need less crowded buses, and we need more of them to make them less crowded. We need to run them more frequently. How do we run them more frequently? We got to get them out of traffic. We're lucky in Winthrop that we really don't have a ton of traffic. It feels like we do, you know, coming in and out of town sometimes, but relatively speaking, it's not that bad. But what we certainly do have dangerous road conditions. And one thing I, you know, really would love for this plan to set forth is a reimagining of our streets, of how we use them, of who they, you know, are prioritized for, which ultimately I would hope would be the most vulnerable. And if we look at our streets as serving the lowest common denominator, you know, that being pedestrians, seniors, people with mobility impairments, children, if we design our streets to work for them, it works for everybody. As opposed to really the last 50 years, our streets have been designed to serve the highest, you know, motorists, people in cars and trucks. And when you do that, you naturally exclude huge segments of the population, or make them feel unsafe, or like they have no choice but to get into a car. Not everyone has that choice. We frequently talk about this as sort of the default, just that obviously everyone's going to drive. Well, not only does everyone not want to drive, but a lot of people cannot physically, or they're not old enough, or they're too old. So really building that into our approach of how we see our transportation network as one that works for the 6-year-old, the 60-year-old, and the 160-year-old, you know, the 880 cities. That's a really comprehensive egalitarian approach that we can incorporate, because we have such a great network ultimately, and our streets are small. We don't have any overpasses or freeways, you know, cutting through our community like a lot of the region does. We're so lucky that we missed that. The you know, urban renewal area really didn't hit Winthrop. We were spared. But little things to chip away at how our streets are used can gain us a really big return. And we do have a complete streets policy on the books to help us do that. So yeah, I hope we can put that into this vision document as something that drives us forward towards 2030.
I agree with Julia. I think that we do need to sort of rethink how we're using our roads and passageways. You know, and I think once the bikes were great, and I think that what I saw in Brookline and Newton, I think last year with the scooters was really cool. And I've been to other cities and I've used them, and I think that we should be open to doing things like that as well. But I think more traditionally around public transportation, I really want to try to reimagine what our bus routes look like, because I don't think that they currently connect parts of town that would be most used. And I don't know exactly what the solution is to that, but I think that that we would have a higher ridership than we already have, and our ridership is above average as far as if you were to look at other MBTA bus routes. But with that said, I think it could be even better, and it could serve more people if it was connecting areas where people actually go. So at some point, I'd like to see somebody come in and look at that, because it's such an important thing. It would reduce congestion and everything else that's associated with it. I also think that for whatever reason, Winthrop has a private operator that operates it, and it's going to take a certain amount of local advocacy from the community to advocate for more buses, shorter split times, things like that, because it kills me to look at the amount of people that are on that bus every morning and literally hear that the people can't get on. And you see some other routes that are serviced by the MBTA where, that have very low ridership, and they have lower split times and everything else. And that's the problem. I think that, I just think we need to be more vocal as a community about the importance of that, which is, I think, and we have great representatives, and I think that we could do that in short, if we really put our mind to it.
Peter, I think the other thing that we could do here is we look at this as a vehicle for getting us in and out of town. That's it, right?
Yep.
That's what the bus does for us. Where, I spent years living in Cambridge, and the bus was to get me from Harvard Square to Porter Square or to Central Square or wherever it was, or to downtown Boston. The problem we have here is also a marketing or I'm not sure what the right word is, a visual idea that it's all about getting out of town, but not getting from
Around town.
McGee's corner to Delby's corner. And we haven't done a good job letting people know, or the bus route necessarily time-wise doing that. Like, I walked a lot today. I could have walked faster, but it might be reminding people that you can jump on at one place and get off at another place as you would if you were in a more urban environment. And so we make the bus about, in my opinion, for me, it's always been, how do I get out of town? How do I get back? How do I get to the blue line? How do I get back? And we've got to look at a way to change that vision.
Yeah.
Could you
Well,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay. Quick. I think that the app has been a great tool for that. You know, I think if you look at that, and I'm on it almost every, you know, at least before the pandemic, I was on it every day. But if you know, that's a great tool, and I think we should do a lot of work to promote that. But I also think that the reason why people don't necessarily use it the same way that people use it in Cambridge and everything else, I think the number one bus that goes along Mass Ave has one every 3 minutes at some point. In Winthrop, at best, you're waiting 12, 15 minutes. If that was something that was a more reliable service, I think people would be more likely to use it to get around, to go to Crest Ave from the center or wherever you're going. I think we just need to really just make the case, I think, a little bit more strongly that this is something that we need in Winthrop.
But I'd go back to what Julie was saying, which is, I think we have to talk transportation in a bigger way. You know, my car was in the shop today. I walked everywhere. It was perfectly fine to do. You could bike places. You can take a bus. You could take a taxi. Just like, again, the various choices of transportation, and to remind people that there are options out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I had probably 3 different people today say, oh, I'll give you a ride. And it's like, I can walk. It's okay. Like, we don't market that or remind people of that well.
No, I agree.
Yeah, but there's little things you can do with space to send that message that, like, we are a community that values walking, that values biking, that values transit, and that driving is part of it. It's all part of the microcosm of transportation. And, you know, little things go a long way that we just don't have a lot of here, like signage and, you know, raised crossing, traffic calming, things that send messages through the built environment that this is how you behave. If you're walking, you're not, you know, a poor person with no option that someone's going to say, oh my God, are you okay? You need a ride? Like, no, walking is actually a really great way to get around Winthrop. And we can, there's so many ways we can do that.
I'm sorry to cut you. A lot of it is perception. I remember going to a meeting and I showed a graphic of, you know, where we all park when we go to Target is pretty much the middle of the parking lot to go to the front door. And sometimes we're going to the seasonal aisle or the electronics, which is in the back of the store. And that's, you know, nearly twice as far as from French Square to the parking lot nobody wants to park in because it's too far away, you know. And it's just, you know, something you get kind of used to doing, and you get programmed that if you're not parked right in front of La Siesta, it's too far. And, you know, so there's definitely some attitudes and kind of social programming that needs to go on with it. But it's such a wonderful small town to be able to walk around. And as my kids get older, allow them to walk around, allow them to drive their, you know, ride their bikes around, and to feel sort of safe about it. But there are some, you know, roads that are supposedly 20 miles an hour where people are going 60. And those are things that I think we need to talk about as a community of, you know, does that haste of you being able to get home, is that worth the risk it is and the effect it has on the whole community? So Carlos, how much time are we long? Or
So, yeah, it's a great conversation.
Cut us off, man. You got to keep us in check, buddy.
We just want to see if we could sample, at least feature the other 2 topics, and then we could circle back to the transportation if people want to. Yeah, we barely scratched the surface on it.
Yeah.
These are all big buckets.
All Right, so I think we have Jennifer who is volunteering on our committee to put forth a few questions or ideas on open space and recreation.
Yes. So considering that everything that we normally do in town has been upset by COVID, thinking of some of the wonderful outdoor things that we've been able to do. But looking ahead to a time when we can do those things again, are there big ideas for park amenities or large festival areas that will not only foster a sense of community, but also maybe bring tourism to town? For me personally, I think that we've got the landing going, a lot of changes are happening down there. That to me presents a great opportunity to do something down that way. And then also you still have the center. We had the farmers market for a long time, and that was great. There was some concerns about where that was located and where that should be located. And then we've had the Winthrop Days. We've had Julia's been good enough to sponsor the Halloween ride. Yeah, and so what are we thinking in terms of where we want the town to go in our open space, our availability for groups to be able to do things? Or are there other ideas of what we'd like to see happen?
That's great. I'm going to jump on the landing thing because I like that area, and I've been to many other sort of ports and stuff in New England, and we have this kind of funny geographics where our center is not really close to our water. And that's kind of been, kind of maybe forever the problem, where the foot traffic and the place where you kind of want to be is not really connected to the place where people are selling things. But I think there's things we can do as a community to allow for vendors, food truck or ice cream or whatever. And they could be satellites of some of our own businesses to not sort of, again, punish the businesses that we have in the center. But or can we lease a pop-up store out of the little building that we have down there? That building was supposed to be a ferry terminal, and now it's expanded to hold the kind of police force, the water police force. I'm blanking on whatever that's called. Can you lease that? Can there be an ice cream place? Can we rent kayaks there? Not the town of Winthrop, but the town of Winthrop just rents it out, and someone else is worried about their business plan. But it's just a thing that, would be interesting, bring people down there, give people something else to do, and could, support some of the businesses in a different way with maybe a satellite coffee shop or a satellite burrito place from La Siesta or something. I don't know. I just think that's just such an untapped resource, that landing, that huge parking lot with the beautiful piers that we have now built, that it's not really being utilized at all, Jennifer. So I think that's a great point.
And to piggyback on that, Bob, the extension of the landing area and connecting Ural Beach. There's some space down at Ural Beach where we could start scheduling food trucks, all throughout the summer. And working on getting that area. It can be the same thing as a small pop-up that might happen, for kayak rentals or windsurfing, or, there's so much potential there that's untapped and unused that I think as we talk about creating what Winthrop's identity should be, we're so underutilizing the natural marketing of the seashore. I just think it's something that we need to look at very heavily when we talk about some of our open spaces and how we can look at them in terms of using them better.
So I'm going to tie that back to the transportation issue, which is, while it may seem like a beautiful big open parking lot, when you get the boats there and you get any events going on, it fills up really quickly. So you want to not overuse it to the point where you can't get the boats. The point of it is to have landing, having the boats coming in and out. But so would there be a way to have more of a trolley kind of thing or a bus thing where people could get down there from other areas, so that you're not inundating that area with parking, which has certainly been an issue even this summer?
I mean, what are we charging for those boats, right? I mean, I've heard rumors that it's one of the cheapest places on the North Shore to, you know, poke yourself into the water there. And, you know, that is something that's an also revenue source too. So, you know, maybe it would hurt a few folks that are dropping boats into the water, but I think a lot of those folks aren't our community. They're, you know, kind of coming from other communities, parking in our community and taking off in their boat. So I think there's another way to think about the value of that piece of land too. But yeah, well, whether it's a trolley service that costs slightly more, or is it a way to leverage that 712 and 713 bus to act as one? You know, I think probably in the short term, given all the, I think there'll be a budget crunch based on all the COVID stuff. Probably in the short term, we're going to have to get kind of cute with our own stuff with the 712 and the 713 before anyone goes for you know, building a bus route. But I think it's a good point, kind of connecting the dots and identifying where the dots should be. What dots we want to connect is something that this group can do and make recommendations for this report.
Do you think the internal circulation needs of getting from one part of town to the other needs to be solved with a conventional large bus such as the 712 and 713, or could it be accomplished with a smaller like shuttle van type of service? I'm trying to understand if there's demand for running something that frequently within town. Julia, does anyone have insight?
Carlos, you're not going to do it just with the bus. You've got to come up. You got to come up with another source of doing it. You know, as the Chamber of Commerce, we've looked at it from a number of different angles without a solution yet. But the truth of the matter is, let's just look at, you've got a huge population of young people sitting over at the seaport. We've got a ferry that can bring them over here. They've all got golf bags in many of those apartments with no cars. And if they could take the ferry across and get to the golf course and potentially use it on its public days, but there is a void between the landing and the golf course. And, you know, Terry Delahanty, Chief of Police, and I have sat down with Sean Clune, who owns the taxi company, and looked at taxis, and we put taxi stops there. Could you come up with big golf carts that you use in Florida, which would then grab those people and take them to the golf course or take them to the center of town? Those are all possibilities. They haven't been resolved yet at what that might look like, but I think that's the picture of the way you want to look and turn us into, you know, a waterside community.
So I heard not necessarily relying on conventional buses. That's.
I just don't see a 26-year-old getting, 4 of them getting with their golf bags on a bus to go from the landing to the golf course. But if there was another source of, I mean, maybe to go into the center of town, but, you know, Julia, you know transportation better than I do. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, someone put a comment about TNCs, and I mean, there's micromobility, there's so many ways to get around. I wouldn't write off the bus. I mean,
No.
We pretty much historically have treated the bus like it doesn't exist in Winthrop for the last several decades. I mean, we just didn't have signs on our stops. There's not really any amenity. There's not anything saying that this is important, or that if you take this, we recognize you. You kind of feel like, you know, you're choosing the very last option if you take the bus. And you know, our committee worked really hard to rectify that. And, you know, we do have signs on them, but that just doing little things like that to bring some dignity to our existing bus service can go a long way, and are things that we can control more than, you know, increasing frequency, which involves getting more buses, which involves getting the MBTA to buy more buses, which is definitely not happening anytime soon. It's more of a complex problem, but, you know, partnerships with Uber and Lyft can offer a lot of promise. You know, additional micromobility connections. There's so many ways to build out a network that just has choice, options. And I think that's our best way, you know, to really build out our network and branch out to the region. And the ferry is a big piece of that too.
So part of what I'm also hearing you saying, and Carlos, maybe we need to add this to all of this, is we need to, in this community, make the bus softer, sweeter, nicer to ride. I think if you're, again, doing the Mass Ave one, you don't care. I mean, you just get on the bus. Here, it's sort of like, should I get on the bus? I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit of a marketing plan for the bus.
Yeah, that's sometimes communities like the appeal of a shuttle or historic trolley or something in that manner that's provides a similar type of service, but branded, it feels differently.
If you can afford it. Given the very experience, I'd be cautious about introducing without being sure that it can support itself. And Betsy, let me just jump to downtown, specifically the areas that we have. What would you want to see for community gathering space? And that may be, once the center project is done, that may already be taken care of, but is there something specific that you would want to see available?
For a community gathering space, in regards to how it affects businesses? Or
what do you need to have? What do we need to have that we don't have currently? Is it, I don't know, bathrooms, porta potties?
No.
Is it just closing streets? Is it, do we have what we need to have the kind of community festival sort of things that we'd like to do once we can again?
You know, I mean, I think what the plan for French Square looks good. I think green space is important. I'm also speaking more for myself than probably for the chamber at this point, but I think in the long run for the chamber, it's like, it's hard for people to understand that. I mean, Julie and I've had this conversation for years, and probably Wendy and I also, it's like green space and walkable space really does work for people. So I think that's really important. I mean, I'm just watching, you know, I've been in the COVID line a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, and I just look at what's going on I've never seen Ingleside Park used to the degree that it's being used by kids these days. It's crazy busy. And maybe I wasn't out of my office enough to know, but I just think it's more than what it used to be. So I think it's validating that green space is really important for people. And just, this community just needs some time to get used to it. And I think it's important in every one of our business districts, if we can find it. You know, we talk about the center a lot, you know, Crest Ave, Highland Ave, that little park right there, that's a huge piece of property. Also, there's some great businesses there. We've got to consider that. Metcalf Square, we've got to consider. Excuse me. So I think there's a number of places.
Yeah, it's
where we
not
can
just
really
green
utilize
spaces, but public spaces. You know,
Yes.
utilizing our public spaces. They can be green, they can be asphalt if you activate them. You know, our streets are public spaces, not going down the transportation rabbit hole again, Kurt, but just recognizing that streets are a big part of usable public space, and we can use them for so many things. And to connect
Yeah, I think
them.
I said green, and you're right. Julia,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. It's bigger than green.
But green is great. We need green too.
To me, one of the, you know, if there is a silver lining with all the COVID stuff that's been going on, I've been so pleased to see restaurants figuring out how to have outside dining. And I know that, you know, that was a lot of hard work that was, you know, put together between, you know, the licensing boards and the town and, you know, making that all happen. And I hope that's something where I want most of all the COVID crap to go away. That's one thing I hope sticks around, you know, just to see how places like De Parma, for example, have activated that corner. I know that that's a deal that's being made with the hardware store. And I mean, hopefully that deal can stay a little bit longer. My God, it's such I've eaten there several times and it just feels so much nicer. And I'm hoping if you know, God willing, that these businesses survive, because I want all these restaurants to survive, is that on the backside of this, they may say, you know what, now I'm back to life. Maybe I should invest in that outside space. That's been a really positive thing I've seen happen in more than you used to just have one or two places that had outside dining, and now there's more. So I'd like to kind of figure out how to do that and be more creative. And I think Wendy was talking about that space next to the beach, like Ural Beach. It just takes a couple licensing boards in the town to decide, yeah, we want to have X happen there, and there may be some money invested in terms of making sure there's a couple plugs so they could plug in some lights or plug in the cash register or whatever they need to do. But we could transform parts of not huge swaths, but parts of our town to be more active. And it wouldn't even have to be all the time. Could just be for special events or for a month or whatever. And I think there's kind of low cost, low impact ways to activate the town.
Totally.
Yeah, and I'll just add, at the council meeting next week, we're taking up a permanent outdoor dining ordinance. So it's something that we are working on. So if you think that was a good thing, I would hope we could all come together on that, because I think it also was a big success.
Yeah, I mean, I just need to say that between us at the chamber and the licensing board, Mark and the whole committee, we worked really hard. And Peter, you were part of this in May. Like, we knew that in June it was going to become an issue, and we worked really hard from the very beginning at making sure that we could be ready when the governor said, you can open up outside space, to execute it, and went around to every single business and taught them. And some of them took longer. De Parma took longer. Antique Table took longer. We begged them. It's okay. They needed to do what they did, but licensing had meeting after meeting after meeting to make sure that those guys could all have outside space. Again, between them and now the council or rules and ordinance next week, we're going to keep that going for a while. Our goal is that nobody closes because of COVID. And so far, knock on wood, we're all closed, but everybody still needs support. We got to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, there's been a huge period of awakening, urban awakening that's really happened around the nation, around the world, and here in Winthrop since COVID, because we are home more. What was our daytime population before this? The amount of our population was actually in town during the day, very small percentage of the people that actually live here. Everyone was gone. So many people gone during the day. Most of those people are here now in town and are looking at, well, what's here? What are our restaurants? What are our stores? And think that the potential there for, infusion of economic support is huge if we continue to be creative about activating our spaces and thinking creatively about everything from parks to the street, to the curb, to the parking lot, to that little alley, like every little space that we can use to make it a space for people. That's what drives an economy. That's what makes a strong community, a place where people want to be. But there's some compromises to doing that involve changing the way it's always been in recent history. But if we have vision and confidence, willingness to move forward, we've already seen, by force because of COVID, that parking lot, I guess we could do outdoor dining and the sky didn't fall. So maybe we can build that confidence to keep taking risks, if you will.
And that is a perfect segue into our next section.
Oh, exactly.
Well done, Julia.
Take it away.
I planned that.
So when we look at some examples of potential ideas for looking at how the town can focus on improving economic development, what can those things look like? i.e. year-round outdoor dining. Things like, how do we attract a brewery? How do we get some of the shoppers from other cities and towns that are nearby to actually realize that 145 will take them somewhere other than to get lost? What are some of the things in terms of like our marine related type of industries that we could look for to bring into town? So what are some of those ideas where we could really use that visioning process to improve the economic development?
I think, Wendy, one of the things that we're going to need to think about, and sorry to bring this in on transportation again, but is how you get in and out of town, particularly with all of the development that's going on around us. I know just the other weekend trying to get out on a Saturday, it was a half an hour from here to the T-stop. So, and that's going to be, that's only going to get worse, I think, with Suffolk Downs being built up. But Suffolk Downs is being built up, and those people are going to go somewhere. And if it would be an opportunity to do some development here, to draw them here, it's just we need to think about how that's going to happen and where are the choke points, and is there anything we can do about that?
HYM is always willing to listen.
Yeah, I mean, as a member of the planning board for several years, I've heard about, oh, we don't want to get more dense, or we don't want more housing here because it's going to give more traffic. But the reality is we're affected more from the outside in than the inside out. And, that traffic, when you're trying to get past Dunkin' Donuts going to Eastie, is backed up because of Eastie, and Eastie's got there's no brakes on Eastie. They're going for it. And now we're going to have that in the other direction. So, this boat that had been barely, kind of floating in the black for the last few years because of subsidies, I think more people are going to turn to that. But I also wonder if more folks are just going to be home. My boss doesn't know it yet, but I'm not actually ever going to go back to work now, because I really like being able to be home and be flexible, and I can go to my job sites if I need to, but for the most part, I can kind of be here. And that's allowed me to go take a walk, to go get a coffee and go grab lunch and do things that I never did on Monday through Friday in this community. And I don't think I'm the only person that feels that way, at least in some part. It's, no one's going to go back to normal, 9 to 5 in Boston. I mean, some people will have to, but I think if everybody had their choice, being home for a day or two a week may be the new normal for a little while. And that's only going to help us too. So I do think doing things here that is special. I don't think we're going to compete with Target on price or quantity, but doing things that are unique, and whether it's waterfront related or just, some funky place where it's the only place you can get that type of beer, or the only place you can get that kind of sweatshirt or whatever, is the thing, or the best barbecue in Eastern Massachusetts, whatever. Those kind of unique opportunities is what's going to drive people to come here, and showcasing them, finding them out, and if they don't exist, trying to kind of make them exist. Encourage them to exist.
So Bob, I think an important thing in that regard is, a couple things. One is from a chamber standpoint, so from a business standpoint, chamber aside, but the restaurants that we are a part of, which is almost all in town, and there's a lot of them, is they can't survive without outside people. Winthrop doesn't go out to eat enough. We all know that. That's what makes them, survive. So they're already bringing this population into Winthrop that we forget even is happening. And I think that's important to recognize. Thank God for all of them being able to do that sort of stuff. It's not happening as much right now, but it is important that it is out there and happening. And we need to help them. Part of my job, I feel like, is helping them get that message out to Cambridge, Boston, Lynn, wherever, and it's okay to come to Winthrop and have something to eat, inside or outside. So I think there's that part of it. And then I think the other piece is what you're saying, which is, if we're all staying home and working at home, and you're walking to the local place for coffee, where normally you drive into the city and then get your coffee or take your coffee with you, you've just given money to the center, to Winthrop. And we all need to be doing that. And that's how we're going to help these guys stay alive. The winter's going to get ugly, I guess. We don't know, but I'm scared about it. And we've got to try to keep, you know, I feel like, you know, what I want to do is have nobody close because of COVID. I don't want anybody closed because of anything, but in particular COVID. So how do we keep, you know, supporting everybody as we're doing this? And that's one thing. And then going back to Carlos and what we're trying to do here tonight, which is another whole thing, is what's the vision down the road when we're in this place where we don't know when down the road looks what we want it to look like.
And that's one of the things we had talked about as a committee too, as well as how do we work on the COVID-19 environment? How do we help the chamber, help the businesses? What are some of the things that we can do at a local and state level for the current businesses or businesses that are hoping to open right now, that are looking for a home? Are there things that we could help facilitate in terms of that economic development a little bit? So one is the, you know, the economic maintenance of the current businesses we have, but in terms of the folks who are still willing to open a new business right now. And there are a few of them, surprisingly. But part of the focus, I would think, for us too, would be to look at what are the types of businesses we do need here? What are the things that are actually going to have potential viability? I mean, is it just going to be a sock shop? You know, we sell socks. Or is it everyone needs socks? So that's the kind of thing where we were kind of going with that, was what are some of the businesses that somewhat based on Winthrop as who we are currently. People have often talked about looking at some of the smaller niche type of businesses that we need, and how can we look at it to get people to come here, to want to invest in the community, or people that we have here now with those ideas, how do we get to help them jumpstart to get them going?
So Wendy, one of the things that, you know, I think you and I have probably talked about in the past, and I've had conversations with friends of mine who are developers and architects, is housing drives retail, not the other way around. And we always think retail drives housing, but it doesn't. So, you know, as we look at 1026 potentially finally getting developed, and what are those 20 something units or 18 to 20 units going to need in the center in order to do something, because housing drives retail. You know, what happens when some other of the properties in town are looking at getting developed? What's going to happen? I think we got to think about what are those businesses that will come after housing drives retail, instead of just like, what's the next retail thing you and I have had this conversation, probably joked about it, you know, 8 years ago. It's like, yeah, you can't buy socks in Winthrop.
And that's a sock joke, but in
right.
all honesty, to understand how that flow works, it's more a matter of, we know some of that housing's coming, and we're looking at developing, and we're looking at some of our other empty spaces that have the potential to become housing, and looking at them as multi-use, having a mixed use. And that's part of the thing that we need to really examine as a town. How do we come to an understanding that mixed use building, you can have first and second floor be some level of retail and offices, and then your third and fourth floor, if there's a fourth floor allowed, to be housing. So I think there's some things that we need to look at as a town, and as we're working on rules and ordinances for buildings and things with the different committees, what's going to be acceptable to make economic development also viable.
I think the other thing we have to talk about is what the tax implications are in those things, because we're a community that's got limited resources coming into our budget, and what is additional housing, because people are very scared about too much housing. What's additionally tax base going to come with some of those developments?
And that's why I encourage them to all have retail. Because we need
And there's definitely a lot of myth busting that needs to go into that conversation to defray
Yeah.
our sort of fear of housing, that more housing equals more cars. It's not the case. You know, more housing equals more people, but how you develop your community then shapes the kind of vehicular traffic that everyone's afraid of. You know, there's this concept called the 15-minute neighborhood. I know we're trying to move on. I just want to throw it out there so everyone can look it up. It's really, you know, Paris has really embraced this. Multiple communities throughout the US have, but we could actually do that in Winthrop. It's really about looking at having everything you need within a 15-minute walk of your community, of your house. If you can't walk, then of a shuttle ride or micro mobility or, you know, the ride. There's always ways to accommodate people who cannot walk and bike. I just want to be clear about that. But the economic development conversation is so important because it makes our community more, we're able to add more housing without it generating more air pollution, more traffic congestion, because we have more things for people here and people can live and work in their community and, you know, walk to their groceries and to school and to get their hair and to get socks. You know, when we have that here in this community, we're not a bedroom community, which we really are right now, where people are just leaving, often by car, but it doesn't have to be that way. And we can shape our future so that it's not. We can increase our population, have more foot traffic, more businesses that get more customers during the day, so we can have, you know, lunch, more lunch places in the center because people live there and they're working there. And then, you know, we have a vibrant, you know, robust local economy without all the implications and the consequences that often hold us back because we're afraid of them.
Thank you, Julia. That was a great way of putting that together. Right now, I think we're running slightly behind, so we wanted to give an opportunity to anyone else who hasn't, other than the committee, to be able to ask questions in response to or reactions to all of this robust discussion that we have had together before we conclude tonight's meeting, and then we can, within the next 2 weeks, take the survey. So Christian, if I could ask for your assistance in how do we, right now we're asking people to either unmute themselves or raise their hands and if they have a question.
Yes, so in order, it looks like Nellie is the first person to succeed at raising her hand, but in case you don't know how to do this, the diagram that Carlos has included on the presentation illustrates what it should look like to you. But to get to the raised hand, if you're on your computer, you just need to right click on your name in the participant list and then choose the option raise hand, or you should be able to see at the bottom of the participant list a series of options that include yes, no, go slower, go faster. All the way to the left of those options should be a hand raise. If you're calling in on the phone, you can raise your hand, I believe by dialing *9. And I'm just going to double check that and I'll make sure that that's correct. But for now, I'm going to unmute Nellie so that you can ask your question. So you should be ready to go, Nellie. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for putting together this great meeting. It's really interesting to hear everyone talk. I wanted to say that something we didn't really touch on during the public land discussion is that I think the biggest challenge that's facing our community is global warming. We're not going to be able to have economic development or housing or anything if we're underwater. So I just, I wanted to maybe hear some members of the committee talk a little bit more about that. I also wanted to say that when I look at the map of our town, the biggest piece of undeveloped land that I see is the golf course. And I wonder if there's a way to make that more ecologically sustainable. I also really love the idea that was floated in the presentation about the Crystal Cove landing being sort of replanted. Thank you guys so much. I'm really excited. Winthrop 2030. Woo!
Yay! Love the enthusiasm.
Thank you for that. Responses or more questions from anyone? Any other?
Well,
There were
just
a
to
lot-
let Nellie know.
Go ahead, Wendy, please.
Sorry, to let Nellie know that we have been also talking about climate and resilience and the different neighborhoods that might need some additional work. That has been part of the scope, and it will be included in our survey.
Very cool. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Nellie. I'm going to put you back on mute. And it looks like Kurt has a question. So I'm going to, it looks like I have asked you to, oh, there we go. Perfect. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got it. How's everybody doing? Like the presentation, the one thing I always go back to and I think about is we always reference 2010 population. And I always go back and I look up our actual estimated population for the most current time, and we're over 18,500 people in this town right now. Sometimes I think that gets left out, that our population has grown since 2010. And that I think some of the concerns, just speaking from people, going down the center and talking to them about, how many more people do we want to fill this town with? Do we want to be where it's just 1,000 more units here in town with multiple people? Or I think we need to look at a view, if we're looking into the future, how dense do we want to be? I do think that, yes, we definitely need the multi-use buildings, not just have apartment buildings in our town. We need that mixed multi-use areas that will help generate foot traffic too. I think that's important. Me personally, I'm a huge car person. I'll never probably change my mind on that. Probably have 6 in this household soon. But I do think yeah, Wendy's shaking her head. I think the foot traffic that I've seen lately, kind of down the center and down in the parks, being with COVID, more people being out, it seems like, regular at this time of year. I know it's hard to change the mindset of people, and generally it takes at least 5 years to change how people think and accept the change. I know in my work, I do that all the time, where we have to put something into place, and to get people really following it and understanding it, it generally takes a minimum of 5 years just for that. So, I don't know, just a couple of things I wanted to throw in there, mainly about the population, because I do feel that's really sometimes.
So I just looked those numbers up. So 2010 was about 17,500. And I think it's just estimated 2020 census is 18,900. So about a plus 1,400 if you believe Google, which is never wrong.
Well, we'll incorporate into the document, the 2010 is the actual count, and then the estimates are done. We usually rely on the 5-year aggregated estimates instead of the single year because of the margins of error. But we'll acknowledge both, and also they are estimates, so we'll find out with the 2020 count how it compares to all of the recent estimates as well.
I want to respond quickly to the concern about packing in people, or how many more people do we want, or do we want to allow, like, first of all, these are really dangerous conversations that quickly broach on social exclusion, but is the fear bodies of people in our town? Because I'm pretty sure over the last, couple hundred years of this town, we've had a lot more people living here than we do now. Is it the people, or is it the cars? We think we have more people, we're going to be like congested, and we don't have enough room for every single person to have a car. But we have a lot of housing stock that can fit a lot more people than there are right now. And a lot of those houses are single family homes with dwindling household sizes in them that used to have more people. Now they're empty nesters, or even just one person that can't find a place to downsize. We don't have a lot of multifamily. We don't have a lot of apartments in this town. We really don't. We are also facing a regional and statewide housing crisis. In the more metro communities like ours that are actually quite close to job centers, The more we refuse opportunities to develop and provide more housing, the more we drive that demand further out to cheaper land where there's not restrictions on development. And then we shoot ourselves in the foot because then those people are having to commute from farther, congesting the roads that we all rely on. So I just want to sort of put that out there to have a regional mindset when we think of how we grow, because we are not an island. We are very
We are an island.
We feel like an island, but we rely on the
Sorry, I didn't mean to yell that.
Yeah, we
thought I was muted.
basically are, but we can't
We're
exist as an
peninsula.
island. Like we can't exist without leaving this town. So what we do has implications on the region, which then has implications on us. So that's just something to consider when we talk about like packing it in. We can determine what that looks like, how we build. We're going to build tons of parking, then yeah, we're going to get tons of cars. Are we going to build units that people can walk to things, can access good transit? Then we're going to get more people, more foot traffic, more business, and not more cars. Just to consider that.
And I think it also really, we also need to consider housing affordability in all of this. I hear a lot of people when we talk about housing in town say that they don't want us to turn into some of the other communities in the metro area that have been, overpopulated, and all of a sudden the costs go through the roof, and then you can't afford to live there anymore. There's been a lot of research done on ways that we can avoid this, and I think that we can do it. We just need to be willing to employ the tactics that many of these other communities that didn't, 20, 30 years ago when they were, building and pushing so many people out. So I think that we need to be cognizant of that as well as we're doing this. But I don't think that means that we can't increase density and do it at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive.
Peter, I think the other thing that we have to do is recognize that there is I don't know what the percentage is, but a strong group of our population which is already considered in the affordable housing category. We've talked about this for years in the economic development different committees. It doesn't mean that everybody in Winthrop is poor. It just means that what the number is for limitation and what people make in this community puts them in that category. And we've got to figure out how to maneuver in the best way possible with that, instead of, separating them as huge different categories, I think. And just embrace what is true, which is we got some blue collar, we got some white collar, and we got some people at 50,000, we got people at more than that. And what does that do for us? And what are the percentages?
So this is a really great conversation, but we are reaching the end of our time, and I know that Phil has a question. So I just want to give Phil the opportunity to ask the last question, and then I think we'll have to move into the closing remarks from Carlos. So Phil, I'm going to ask you to unmute. If you can accept that, you should be able to talk. There you go.
It did. It worked. It wasn't letting me come in earlier until I got to raise my hand. But I just wanted to come on and thank the people from MAPC for taking on this cause and for helping us. I want to thank all of the participants that are on the committee, the WIN2030 committee, for the time and effort you put in. I look forward to seeing your report. I appreciate the hard work that you're all doing. Don't forget, we have another situation beside the center. We have Crest Avenue, we have Shirley Street, we have a lot of opportunity areas that should be looked at. Quite a bit of our town has been put into an opportunity zone. I'd like to see something done with that opportunity zone and the town grow. As far as people thinking that there are too many people in Winthrop, as Julie will always tell us, it's not too many people, it's too many cars. So Julie, keep up the good work with your transportation thoughts and ideas, even though you're not on that committee anymore. You're on the planning board, and that's just as important, not more. But thank you all for participating. It's just unfortunate. I saw it at the most, we've only had 36 people on And this being the final public meeting, I was hoping that we'd have at least 100 or more. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from anyone who hasn't had a chance yet?
We do have one. It looks like Karen has a question, and it is 8 o'clock, so we can choose to end the meeting, or if you are okay to go over a little bit, I can unmute Karen and they can ask their question.
We can do that.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask you to unmute Karen, and then we can go from there.
Oh, I need to do that? Okay.
Oh. Perfect.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Karen Chavez. I'm sorry I didn't see your first meeting, but I did watch this one. I guess my concerns are the transportation issues in the town. I've listened to everybody talk about this, and the only one that's really addressed the elderly is Michael DeLuiso. I myself, I have a handicap placard, and the reason for that is because I need it. I am not going to park on Walden Street and walk into the center. I have a placard for the reason that I want to be able to park in the center. I am not going to use Uber. I'm not going to use the ride. I have a car, and that's why I have a car that is insured within the town. You know, just listen to everything that you guys have been saying, and there are too many cars in this town, and maybe bringing in more people is going to just bring more cars. I think Everett had a great thing when they said that you want to build new condos, you want to build new apartments, that's fine. But you're not going to get any parking permits. Your cars are not going to be allowed.
They built
Can't
with zero
park on our
parking.
streets. I'm sorry, Julia, but let me finish, please.
Sorry.
You know, I just think that you're not thinking about this. You're not thinking about, I'm not going to ride a bike, Julia. Maybe you are, but I'm not. And I think that you need to think about these things. You want to build, that's fine. But don't give these people permission to park in the town. Do not give them parking stickers. And that is a big, big thing. As far as business is concerned, you can't even, fill the stores that you have now that are empty. What are you going to do with that? Are you just going to let that keep going on and on and on? The center is a disaster. And it's going to be a disaster for the next couple of years until everything is done. Until the town looks at what they really want. Do you want to bring in a lot more people into our schools? Our schools are already overcrowded. And please don't tell me they're not, because I know that they are. Please start thinking about these other things. Just don't talk about how you're going to bring in business unless you can solve some of the other problems.
Thanks, Karen.
Any other questions or comments?
Carlos, it's Betsy from the chamber. Can I just, I guess what I want, because you're recording this, I just want one last thing to sort of say, and that is, I know the center, and we have many business districts, and this is not anything against any of the other business districts, but the center seems to be the focus about parking. It seems to be the focus about the construction. It's the focus about open or empty spaces. I really want people to understand that when this infrastructure project started, I decided that it was important for us to get in touch with every business in the center. So everywhere from sort of Fremont Street down to Somerset Ave, up Bartlett, up Woodside, up Jefferson. So that whole area, which you guys are now intimate with, I got an email for every single business that I could, and there might be 2 that I didn't. But out of that, I got 84 businesses. There are 84 separate businesses in the center, and none of those are in empty space. We might have 1 or 2 empty space. I know that we still have some growth to do, but I think that we've got to change how we look at this and that we look at this as if the whole place is empty. It's not. We've got 84 businesses that I email every single week what the center business district updates are to. And we've got maybe 2 or 3 that are empty spaces. So we're not horrible. We've just got some work to do, and we've got businesses to support, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much for that. I want to thank everyone for a really good discussion. The chat function in Zoom automatically records your comments, so we have that as a record as well. And what we want to do right now is highly encourage everyone to take the 35 question survey in order for us to really be able to get all of your ideas. We were only able to scratch the surface tonight. The last survey, we had 378 respondents. Let's see what we can do in the next 2 weeks. So please share with everyone the link. They can do it on their mobile phone. You can do it on a laptop, desktop. But this is an opportunity for us to get even more input, so that we could start to tease out the trends and what people really gravitate towards and what they don't. And it'll help us greatly to be able to start writing some of the goals and the vision statement for the WIN2030 vision plan report. Thank you everyone very much for this. Is a really good conversation. And we'll be posting, I believe Christian is coordinating with Winthrop Cable Access Television to have tonight's Zoom meeting also running on that for the benefit of anyone who wasn't able to attend.
Thank you guys for all your support.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.